Hey guys, welcome to another video, Purple Political Talk here, and in today's video, we're going to be looking at the 2020 senatorial elections as of October 10th, 2020. So in today's video, we're going to go through and look at things that have changed these elections, and overall look at a projection of what the map for the United States Senate might look like post-January 2021 when this class of senators will be inaugurated for their next term. So before we get started, please remember to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications to get notified when we post our next video. So let's get started. So to begin with, we're going to start by filling in the safe states for the Democratic Party. Currently, the Democratic Party has had a very solid grip on these safe states, and they haven't changed much, which sounds pretty counterintuitive, as usually these races, if they're in a safe state, they should be safe for the whole election. However, for the Republican Party, that hasn't happened, so that's why I'm making the clarification. And overall, the Democrats winning these safe states and having a big hold on them, especially in states like New Mexico and Virginia, is that these states have traditionally voted Democrat. And in the case of those two kind of swingish states, the Republicans did not contest in those states. They are running not so strong candidates in states where the Democratic Party has been proven to have a very big trend going on. And day in, day out, they're gaining support in those states. That said, let's move on to the Republican safe states, or states that the Republicans should be winning by, or we project for them to win by, around 15% or more. At this point, the list of these states have narrowed down a lot, and only a certain group of states currently still classify as safe Republican states. And overall, this map has really changed over the last 2 to 3 weeks since we did our last prediction, and truly comes down to many things. One, the Republicans are very short on money right now. They're spending a lot of money on the presidential race. They have a ton of races they have to contest if they want to keep control of the Senate. Those things combined, along with not so big fundraising numbers, the Republican party has been struggling with money. And truly, this is a money game. And when you're low on money, chances are you will lose. In addition to that, we have the big super spreader of COVID-19 amongst DC Republicans. So at this point in time, that's also a very bad look, which some are running for re-election, in this case, North Carolina's Tom Tillis. So these things in general don't paint a good picture for the Republican Party in general. And overall, if we're seeing the Republican Party come down a little bit, it's mostly because of those two things. But again, these states that are safe are states that have been very, very traditionally Republican. They voted for Republicans by over 15% consistently at past, and there's no reason for them not to do that again. So now that we talked about the safe states, let's go in and dive into the contested races, in the races that could actually go to either candidate or have at least a realistic chance of going to either candidate. So let's start off with the Democratic Party. At this point in time, the Democrats are performing very well with their likely states, or states they would win from 5 to 15%. And for the most part, these include states like Arizona, like Colorado, Minnesota, Michigan, at this point, the state of New Hampshire as well, which gives them a 48 seat numbers. So I think at this point in time, we're seeing very good trends for the Democrats. In states like Arizona and Colorado, it comes down to the Democrats having very good challengers for unpopular Republicans. In this case, we have Martha McSally in the state of Arizona, who is very unpopular, who's running against a very strong Mark Kelly, who's overperforming Kirsten, who won this race in 2018. And we're constantly seeing yet again that Mark Kelly is performing by 5%, 6% in some of the most recent polls in a state which, keep in mind, voted for President Trump by around 3% in 2016. And overall, this just shows the trend of the state of Arizona. And keep in mind as well that this is a pretty moderate Republican state. And truly, what has been shifting as the Republican Party has been moving further to the right, some of the voters are starting to move further to the left, especially for candidates like Mark Kelly, who aren't as liberal, and they're moderate candidates. And I think it's just a candidate that fits the picture in the state. Same thing in the state of Colorado with John Hickenlooper going against Cory Gardner. Cory Gardner is very unpopular, and John Hickenlooper was very popular when he was governor. He fits the picture. He's very liberal, and see as very liberal, who has a very moderate Republican as their senator. Overall, we're seeing John Hickenlooper perform very well with around 8 8-point leads in the polls. And this is going to be a hard race for Cory Gardner to win. However, I think overall, since John Hickenlooper is doing very well, I think he might definitely carry a lot of those voters. Now going on to the races have different situations, I guess, from these two states, which are actually pretty similar. We have the states of Minnesota, Michigan, and New Hampshire. So in the state of Minnesota, we have Tina Smith, who is the incumbent senator after Al Franken, U.S. senator who had to resign from his seat. This was his old seat, and she came in 2018 through a special election. At this point in time, Tina Smith is doing a pretty good race. She's leading in the polls, and even though the Republican Party has started to gain some momentum in the state of Minnesota, Tina Smith has been able to keep her lead about over 8% in the polls, which is very good. And in most forecasts, they have this race very likely to go to Tina Smith. And overall, since the state of Minnesota has been voting more and more Democratic as of recent years, but then also we're seeing the big I guess swoosh of Republican voters. Tina Smith is running a very good race here, and overall should be winning by around 5 to 15%. Now, in the state of Michigan, we have Gary Peters, incumbent U.S. senator, who is running against John James. Very, very strong opponent in John James. And overall, this race could really come down to a couple points, but realistically, it should fall by around 5 to maybe 7 points. Gary Peters appeals to the Midwestern voter. He is from the state of Michigan. However, John James appeals to the Black minority in the state of Michigan, which in areas like Detroit, there is quite a bit of them. And in general, I think that this race could be closer. And I think overall, this race, the way that Gary Peters has been able to lead the race for a consistent time, at times getting very close, around maybe 2% in the polls. But right now, we're seeing around 5 to 6% leading the polls for Gary Peters. Again, this is a race Gary Peters should have a pretty easy time with. Now, the last race that is in the likely Democratic column is the state of New Hampshire, which at this point in time, we have Jean Shaheen, popular U.S. senator, who is leading her opponent by around 10% in the polls. Overall, she is a very popular incumbent, and she should win re-election easily. However, since it's a state of New Hampshire, a state that is pretty moderate when it comes to a lot of things, it's going to be narrowed down a lot. So those are all of the likely states for the Democratic Party. Let's now move on to the likely states for the Republican Party. So right now, we're seeing some of the likely states for the Republican Party be states that traditionally would vote Republican. However, because of Democrats' very good candidate choice and kind of, I guess we could say, general dislike of Donald Trump as a whole, the Republican Party has been able to lose some support in these states, and truly the Democratic Party has gained a lot. So let's start off with some of the states on this list. So first we have the state of Alaska, which is a very interesting race between Al Ross and incumbent Dan Sullivan. Dan Sullivan is a pretty much establishment Republican who really shouldn't have a hard time winning this race. However, the Democrats have chosen a very good candidate in Al Ross, who's been able to narrow down the margins. And realistically, one of the things we're seeing here? In Alaska, Donald Trump's not the most popular Republican. He is not very popular in the state of Alaska. And truly, another thing that we're seeing here is a lot of those independent voters, there's a big movement and crusade against Trump. Even some libertarians and most Green Party voters, which actually make up a bigger amount of the Alaskan electorate, they're siding with Al Ross, which will give them a couple more percentage points. This race is narrowed down. We're seeing Dan Sullivan constantly lead in polls by around 5%. And I think this race will definitely go by around 5 to 6% in his favor, and Dan Sullivan should be the winner. Going on to the state of Texas, this is a state that a lot of people expected to be very close during the senatorial race. However, to be honest with you, this race has not been very close. And there's many things that definitely come into this. So first of all, we have in the state of Texas, John Cornyn, who he's not the most popular of senators. He's actually more unpopular than Ted Cruz. But we also have a pretty weak candidate choice in the Democrats. Like, they could have chosen a better candidate and probably had a chance of winning this race. However, since MJ Heger isn't the strongest of candidates, I think John Cornyn has pretty much this race wrapped up. He should be winning by around 6%. And in recent polling data, we've seen John Cornyn lead by around 4 to 5 to 6%. Overall, very strong numbers for Senator John Cornyn. He should be able to win re-election. Going on to the great state of Kansas, this race is quite interesting because Barbara Bollier, the Democratic challenger, has started to gain momentum, and very big one at that, going against Roger Marshall, incumbent United States Representative for Kansas' 1st Congressional District. So at this point in time, we're seeing a race where Barbara Bollier is starting to narrow it down. Overall, I think Roger Marshall should be able to win here by around 5%. However, in some recent polling data, which I want to see a bigger trend, we're seeing Barbara Bollier being close to leading or even leading. So right now, it's not even a big trend. It's only a couple polls sprinkled in there. However, I would want to see a trend before moving this race into the lean column. However, come election day, we could definitely see this race move into the lean column, and I wouldn't be surprised if it did. But overall, Roger Marshall is doing a very good job in that race, running a very good race, and appealing to those moderate Republicans. And at this point, what is changing the state of Kansas? There's liberal Republicans in the state, and there's very conservative Democrats. Put those two things together, that just brings a lot of support for the Democratic Party, considering that most Democrats in Kansas are pretty moderate to conservative. So that's something to keep in mind. Going on to the more southern region of the United States, let's start off with the state of Kentucky. In the state of Kentucky, we have Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell going against Amy McGrath, which at this point is going to be a very, very interesting race. This race was going to be close if we looked at it back in July, where truly the Democrats have the momentum. But since it's come out that Amy McGrath might not be the most liberal person, a lot of Democrats are staying home in this race. And overall, they're probably going to hand the victory to Mitch McConnell. And Mitch McConnell has been doing pretty well in polls, winning by around 5%. Again, this is the Senate Majority Leader seat, and the chances of them losing here are very low, considering that for them, like as an image as a whole, this seat is very important. Like for the Republican Party in the Senate, it would be very embarrassing if their majority leader lost their seat. So I think like this is a race they're definitely investing a lot of money into, and overall, I think it's going to pay off. Now, going on to the seats of Mississippi and Alabama, we have the first flip for the Republican being in the state of Alabama. We have incumbent Senator Jones, who is a very interesting Democrat because he's in a red state, and he got elected because his opponent back when he ran his first race and won his first election was someone that really did something that was messed up, and overall, that didn't resonate with a lot of the voters, so they ended up voting for him. However, now that we have somewhat of a bigger and more popular figure in Tommy Tuberville should have a pretty clear path of winning the Senate race. And we're currently seeing a race where Tommy Tuberville should be able to win, but by over 5%. Recent polls have him winning by around 4 to 7%. Doug Jones is a strong candidate for the Democrats here in this state. However, it's not going to make it completely the whole way. And if they think a similar thing that we're seeing in the state of Mississippi, Mike Epstein, a Democrat who was former Secretary of Agriculture, he is very, very popular in the state, especially amongst African Americans in the state. He's one of the leading African American politicians in the state of Mississippi. He's going against incumbent Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith, who truly is not that popular. And at this point in time, what's doing it for the Republicans here? It's a very Republican state. Even though the Democrats have a very strong candidate, the only way for Cindy Hyde-Smith to lose here is if she did something very bad, a big scandal popped up. Overall, Cindy Hyde-Smith has a pretty solid grip on the state. The closest poll we've been seeing is around 8% in favor of Cindy Hyde-Smith. And overall, I think we should see that resonate in election night results. So those are all the likely states for this race, where now we have 45 Republicans to 48 Democrats in the balance of power. Now let's take a look at the lean states, or states that would be won by 1.5 to 5%. Right now, the Democrats have some of these states, most notably the states of North Carolina and the state of Maine. Although, especially in the state of North Carolina, the race has started to narrow down a lot. So let's start off with the state of North Carolina. This race was looking like it would have gone by the higher lean margins, maybe 3 to 5% for Cal Cunningham. However, he has had a very big scandal over the last couple of days with a sexting scandal, which truly is going to affect him. And so I think his lead is going to drop by a couple percentage points. I think he might just be leading by 1.5% now, especially considering that this state has a lot of conservative, very religious people. And again, that's something that's not very religious. So overall, this race is going to be interesting. Tom Tillis is probably going to still be unseated. However, Cal Cunningham's margin of victory has narrowed down. And if things keep on going downhill for Cal Cunningham, we could even see Tom Tillis come out ahead. And Tom Tillis has also tested positive for the coronavirus, which truly might actually help him if he can resonate with the voters. However, I think at this point in time, it's a worse image look than a better one. And I think at this point in time, Cal Cunningham had the lead. And those two scandals, and I guess COVID-19 and getting COVID-19 is not more of a scandal, but more of an image thing. Overall, it's going to level out the playing field, but I think Cal Cunningham should be winning this race. Going on to the state of Maine, we have Susan Collins, incumbent United States Senator, going against Sarah Gideon. And in this race, it's become more and more abundantly clear to Maine voters that Susan Collins is pretty much probably not prepared to be in the Senate. And that's what we've seen in a lot of opinion polling. Sarah Gideon has led over Susan Collins for a pretty long time in the polls, and she has consistently led. From being narrow from around like a very close race to now we're seeing a race go in the 3 to 4% range. We're seeing Sarah Gideon holds a very strong race. And again, this is a race we should definitely see Sarah Gideon win. And overall, Susan Collins is very unpopular. She has fallen from being one of the most popular senators in the United States Senate, according to their constituents, so now being one of the most unpopular. And it's like a fall from grace because at this point in time, she is very unpopular in the state of Maine, and I think Sarah Gideon should have an easy chance of winning her. However, this state has been close, especially since you have the second congressional district, which always tends to vote Republican. However, I think Sarah Gideon should be able to win here. Now that we talked about the Democratic lean states, let's talk about the Republican ones. At this point in time, there's 3 races that I think Republicans are winning by lean margins, those being both Senate races in the state of Georgia, both the regular and special. And then in addition to that, we have a race that has recently moved into the lean column in the state of South Carolina. These 3 states are pretty similar, I guess, or these 3 races are pretty similar. In the state of Georgia, we're seeing very contested races in both races. We have Jon Ossoff, pretty popular figure in the state of Georgia, going against incumbent Senator David Perdue. David Perdue is not the most popular of people, but Jon Ossoff isn't the most inspiring of candidates. And overall, suburban Georgia should be able to vote David Perdue back and win re-election. And he should be winning by around a margin of around maybe 2 to 3%. And the special election, we're seeing something else very interesting. It's a jungle primary. For those of you that perhaps don't know what a jungle primary is, or if you're not American and you're not as familiar with the political system in the U.S., a jungle primary is essentially a primary where everyone that wants to run for this race wins. And if one candidate reaches over the 50% margin, they win the race. So right now we have 4 major candidates in Kelly Loeffler, incumbent U.S. Senator, incumbent U.S. Representative Doug Collins, Reverend Raphael Warnock, and Matt Lieberman. And I think at this point in time, it's going to be very contested. If the Democrats could probably get someone through the primary, they're probably going to lose. However, I think right now, if you look at the numbers, the race is it's like a 3-way race right now between Warnock, Loeffler, and Collins, which I think should show us that the Republicans probably have the support in that race, and they should be winning by around a 2% margin. Now, going on to the state of South Carolina, this is a race that is very interesting. Day in, day out, we're seeing the Republicans lose support in the state of South Carolina. And at this point in time, Lindsey Graham is becoming more and more unpopular in the state. From a lot of moderate Republicans, even flipping at this point in time from Graham to Harrison. In addition to Harrison bringing out the African American population in that state, we're seeing a very strong race run by the Democrats. At this point, Lindsey Graham should be winning in this seat, but it would definitely narrow down. I think at this point, it's probably going to go to Lindsey Graham by around 4%. However, this race has heavily narrowed down. And at this point in time, if we put everything as it is right now, it would be a 50-48 majority with 2 states not called yet. And overall, the Democrats, if they win the White House, which they're expected to, they would have the majority as of right now. They would need to win all the states have filled in blue. But I think, honestly, they're truly going to have at least 2 more states going in their column. And overall, in the Till column, or states that would go by less than 1.5%, the state of Montana and the state of Iowa at this point, I would project going to the Democrats. In the state of Montana, we have Steve Bullock, very popular governor, going against a not so well-known United States senator. So I think at this point in time, against Steve Daines. So I think at this point in time, where we're seeing polling data constantly go for Bullock, where we're seeing very good fundraising numbers in Bullock, and we're seeing a very good amount of money spent by the Democrats here. And in a race where Republicans are short on money, I think Steve Bullock should win here. And I think at this point in time, we're seeing a very strong race ran by his part. And again, this flip would guarantee the if you suppose that everything else goes as it goes, would guarantee the Democrats a majority without having the tiebreaker seat. Now, the last state is the state of Iowa, which is a very interesting race. I think this is the one of the couple of races which have really shifted a lot. And this is a state that I projected flip from my last prediction. where we have Teresa Greenfield now in the lead. Teresa Greenfield has started to lead more constantly in the polls. She's raising a lot more money. And again, the Republicans are short on money, which in a race like Iowa, which is truly very contested, not very good. Overall, Joni Ernst is a pretty good candidate. However, Teresa Greenfield is appealing to the moderates and to those suburban voters in Iowa, which at this point in time, it's going to cause Joni Ernst some problems. So overall, this is my Senate 2020 Senate election prediction as of October 10th, 2020, where we have 48 Republicans to 52 Democrats. This race has narrowed down a lot, and overall, we're going to see the true projection of what the map might look like within the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for our latest content where we talk about more about the presidential race and the senatorial races. Hope you enjoyed the video, and if so, please give it a huge thumbs up, like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. And I hope you enjoyed the video. So bye, guys.